Happy Halloween. Leave now while you still can.
Leave now before Master finds you.
Who is that knocking at my door? Who is that knocking at my door? Who is that knocking at my door? Be gone with you.
Hello everyone, today's video I'll be talking about the final Hammer Dracula movie, The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires from 1974. One way of describing this movie is Kung Fu meets Dracula. Wah! This one is arguably debatable on whether or not if this counts as part of the Hammer Dracula movies. Well, since it does make the list of Hammer Dracula movies, gotta review it on my channel anyway. Christopher Lee is not in this movie as Dracula, but Peter Cushing is still in this one playing Van Helsing. It was the last time he played Van Helsing. When I first heard about this one, I cracked at myself saying to myself, is this for real or a joke? What the heck was Hammer smoking at this time? Or they were just trying to survive, so desperate to keep up with the modern day 1970s. Also around this time period, they've lost a lot of money. Christopher Lee was offered to play Dracula, but he turned it down after reading the script, saying he hated it. He told Peter Cushing not to do this movie. Peter Cushing did this movie as a distraction from his depression over losing his wife and a change of scenery. I don't blame Christopher Lee for not being in this movie at all. Dracula is played by John Forbes Robertson. This one is considered by Hammer fans to be one of the worst Hammer movies, but I've noticed that some Hammer fans seem to enjoy this movie for its fun, cheesy, martial art fight scenes. I can respect and see why that is. But for me, honestly, my own personal opinion, this was an interesting attempt what Hammer was trying to do, but again, it mixes too many subgenres, trying way too hard to make it appealing to modern audiences at the time. Also, around this time period, the martial arts genre was big and popular because of Bruce Lee's movies like Enter the Dragon came out 1 year ago before this movie. The martial art fight scenes were okay and cool at times. They felt like something out of a Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan movie. The plot is a little bit complicated, confusing, and is all over. I cannot describe and tell you what the plot of this movie is, but you're saying to yourself, there is a plot to this movie, but maybe I'm just not seeing it, or not seeing pay much attention or care about the plot when I was watching this movie. As I said before, the fight scenes are cool, but despite being a fan of fight scenes and action movies, that's the problem with this movie. It has a lot of fight scenes, it's not focused much on a story that I'm not seeing. This movie's basically vampires versus kung fu fighters. Also, another way of describing this movie, if the Shaw brothers made their own version of Dracula done in Japanese kung fu style. Around this time period, the Shaw brothers were big and popular, well known for their martial art movies. The actor who played Dracula sucks, and he was barely in the movie, but again, you can make the argument it's hard to say in comment if he was good or bad as Dracula. Like I say, he was barely in the movie, which is true. It's hard to have an opinion on if he could have been an okay Dracula, but we'll never know. I honestly don't know much about him as an actor, so I can't really comment on other things he's done as an actor or know about his reputation. I read it was dubbed in this movie. When John Forbes Robertson found out his dialogue as Dracula was dubbed, he was really mad and upset about this. I'm not sure he was mad at Hammer or Showa Brothers. He was dubbed by David D. Kaiser. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. His makeup was horrible. Dracula possesses a character named Ka, so basically two actors play Dracula in this movie. He doesn't show up again until like the ending for like 1 or 2 minutes, final quick showdown between Van Helsing and Dracula. Van Helsing kills Dracula. The end. And boy, this really sucks, and probably one of the weakest showdowns. Cushing does a good job as always, he's just in a bad movie. The scene where he's teaching students in a classroom, vampires, it makes me wish that he was my teacher. That would be so awesome. I would have loved Peter Cushing to be my professor. No one in the classroom believes Van Helsing on an old legend except for one student because he is the grandson of that famous legend story. It was also interesting to see that Van Helsing has a son in this movie. It makes me wonder, is this the same character of Lawrence Helsing from Dracula 80 1972 and Satanic? Or I could be reading too much into that. Also, didn't Van Helsing die in 1872 after killing Dracula? And yet he's alive in the early 1900s. But again, I'm overthinking about that a little bit too much. This one seems debatable, and this movie has any sort of continuity from the previous Hammer Dracula movies. But the way I see it, the continuity went out the window at this point with Hammer. Hammer and the Shaw Bros did not think twice to watch the previous Hammer Dracula movies and think twice on continuity. That just went all in a different direction, went out the window at this point. The romances between Leyland Helsing, Mei Kui, Vanessa, and Hai Sing. I apologize for not saying that name correctly. These characters have no chemistry. It was interesting for Hammer to do an interracial couple for that time. There's potential, but it's just forced too fast and it's not done well properly. Seeing Vanessa and Chang die was a surprise. At the same time, we didn't get a chance to know these characters that well enough. It's not like how when Spock, Han Solo, and Superman die, they earned it because of how iconic they are. The Army Dead zombie vampire masks look like something that they bought at a cheap costume store. Also, the masks look like something out of the Mexico holiday, the Day of the Dead, their version of Halloween. The finale of Van Helsing and his friends fighting against the vampire zombies makes me think of a pre-Army of Darkness and the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but done as a 70s low-budget grindhouse martial arts movie style. It surprises me Hammer never did their own version of Hammer Dracula versus Frankenstein or the Wolfman, but probably because it would have been too confusing, too much for Peter Cushing to rotate back and forth between playing Van Helsing and Dr. Frankenstein. Or their own version parody of Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein, Monty Python meets Frankenstein and Dracula. We have the vampires that say, "Nee, nee, nee." It's also said this is one of Hammer's last movies, and did not make another movie until 2008. This movie killed it for them. As I said before in my Frankenstein the Monster from Hell video, Hammer could not keep up with the competition with modern-day horror movies around this time period. With so many groundbreaking horror movies around this time period, this movie came out the same year as Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Hammer went from rebooting the Universal Monsters to making great gothic atmospheric horror movies to making a Kung Fu Dracula movie. The other reason why this movie did not do so well, it had a lot of production problems. Because this movie was made by Hammer and the Shaw Brothers Studios. One was not used to how their style of filmmaking was different from others. Even the director, Roy Ward Baker, said making this movie was a nightmare, and that the Shaw Brothers interfered a lot with this movie. To finish off this video, here's another talk on Hammer Dracula home media. Just like the Hammer Frankenstein series, trying to track down Hammer Dracula movies is another big mess. But compared to the Hammer Frankenstein movie media, believe it or not, it was a little bit somewhat semi-easy for me to track down these movies. But at the same time, it was still hard to find some of these movies. I had some of these movies on a bootleg DVD that I got at Comic-Con conventions. I own Horror of Dracula, Dracula's Risen from the Grave, Taste the Blood of Dracula, Dracula 80 1972 on a 4 DVD set. They are owned by Warner Brothers. One day I hope to upgrade these on Blu-ray. Brides of Dracula is owned by Universal, which I own on Blu-ray, and on a Hammer DVD Hammer Universal collection set. Dracula Prince of Darkness is owned by Hammer. I had this on a bootleg DVD after finding it on Blu-ray. I threw out the DVD bootleg. This was a rare one to find before. Scars of Dracula is owned by Hammer, which I also own on Blu-ray. This was also a rare one to find. It was also out of print. I had this on a DVD bootleg that I got at a convention years ago. I got this last year at F5 at the mall back in Long Island from last year. The Satanic Rites of Dracula is in the public domain, as I mentioned in my Satanic Rites of Dracula video. I own this on Blu-ray and DVD. You can watch this on YouTube or Dailymotion. I also got this on Blu-ray last year at F5 at the mall. The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires is owned by Hammer. It's on Blu-ray, but I'm not sure when I'll get this on Blu-ray yet. In North America, the movie was re-edited and retitled called The Seven Brothers Meet Dracula. I didn't see this re-edited version. I'll probably not have time to see that for now. Again, Hammer must get their act together and release these Hammer Dracula movies in a box set, but again, I'm not holding my breath on that one. That wraps up the Hammer Dracula series. Tomorrow we dive into Hammer's Mummies version. See you tomorrow.